Good morning. Happy Sabbath. So it is my privilege to introduce our speaker for today. A renowned scholar on the book of Leviticus, Dr. Roy Gane received his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, where he did his dissertation on Leviticus 16, the passage on the Day of Atonement. He is currently a professor of Hebrew Bible and ancient Near Eastern languages at the Theological Seminary at Andrews University. He is best known for the NIV application commentary on Leviticus and Numbers, and he has authored many articles and several books, including God's Faulty Heroes, Altar Call, Ritual Dynamics, Structure, Cult and Character Purification Offerings, Day of Atonement and Theodicy, and Who's Afraid of the Judgment. This week, he has been conducting a series at the University of Florida called The Gospel According to Moses. The first night, he covered the sanctuary and access to God, how the sanctuary gave us and gave them access to God. Then he covered what do we do with guilt, specifically in the context of the sanctuary service. And last night, he covered Yom Kippur and the character of God. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Roy Gane.
Thank you very much, Joseph. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm grateful to Joseph for hosting me at his apartment. So I'm very grateful to Joseph on more than one count. And I'll be talking a little more later about that apartment. It's something that happened to me yesterday. I told you last night, those who were there, that there was an interesting incident, and I'll be telling you about that. So keep listening. All right. Let's go ahead and begin. I'd like to pray. All right. Dear God, it's incredible to be able to communicate with you so that our voices reach beyond the barrier between the seen and the unseen. You're called by many names. You're known in many ways by many people. You're so great. Your character is so good. We don't understand all of your ways because you're mysterious in many respects. But we know enough that we know that you love us and you have the power to help us. And we need help. So today we come together, and there may be those from various persuasions and backgrounds, but we can all come to you and gain something of wisdom from the knowledge that you've given us. In your name, amen. Now, as Joseph mentioned, the series has been conducted 3 meetings already at the campus center at the University of Florida. So this is a really very different venue. So those who have been there and come to that setting, and then they've come here, and they're not acquainted with this setting, it may be a little bit of a shock to you. This is a Seventh-day Adventist Protestant Christian church, and you've heard Jesus mentioned in prayers and hymns and those kinds of things, and other sorts of things that may be a little unfamiliar to you. You may be unfamiliar with some of the ways we do things, our liturgy, and so on, which is pretty easygoing and pretty simple, as you see. But I just want to make sure that you are feeling welcome. You're very, very much at home. And I know that everybody who'd like to make sure that everyone here is welcome. Whatever your background, doesn't matter if you're Hindu or atheist or Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, it doesn't, Protestant, whatever background you come from, you're absolutely welcome. We're delighted that you're here. And you know, I think we should honor and respect those who have the courage to step out and come into an environment that's a little unfamiliar. When I was 13 years old, I mentioned last night, because I was discussing Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. When I was 13 years old, I was reading a lot of Old Testament. Really, it grabbed me, and I was interested in it, and I got interested also in Hebrew and Jewish backgrounds. And so when I was 13 years old, in Lincoln, Nebraska, I went by myself. Couldn't even drive. I went on a bus. I went to a synagogue. It was a Reformed temple. And I went to the Yom Kippur service, which is an all-day thing. Totally unfamiliar environment for me. Cultural, new experience, just sort of immersing myself there. And I loved it. And the people there, the Jewish people, were so friendly and welcoming and happy that I was there and interested in what they were doing. You know that being interested in one another and being able to communicate about spiritual things across these barriers and expanding our boxes is something that breaks down prejudice. It breaks down hatred. You've heard that perfect love casts out fear. Perfect fear also casts out love. Right? And that's what we have. There's a lot of insecurity, not knowing about others. They're strange, they're weird. And if we get acquainted, we can learn something from them. Now, we may choose to remain in with our own background and so on, but we can still enrich our understanding by interaction with others. So when others come here, when we go there, it's an enriching thing. And God can be happy that the family of mankind is getting along a little bit better and understanding each other. Okay, our series has been the gospel according to Moses. Generally, of course, people think of the gospel of the New Testament connected with Jesus. But there is, gospel, of course, means good news, right? Good news. And yet, when we look at the Hebrew Bible, there's a tremendous amount of good news back there. God's law was good news, and we're going to talk about that here today, a bit why God's law is good news. You may not have thought of it that way. But we can learn a great deal by looking at the background that we have in common between Christians and Jews, which is the Hebrew Bible, founded on the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and that's what we're concentrating on. The purpose of our series is to find answers to some of life's ultimate questions in an ancient collection of documents, the Pentateuch, which forms the foundation of the Jewish Christian Bible. So that's what we've been doing, looking at various topics, and I think you've heard the different topics that we've covered already. Sanctuary and access to God, what to do with guilt, Yom Kippur and the character of God, that's Day of Atonement. Right now we're going to do divine standards versus human subjectivity, a very hot topic these days. And then this afternoon, or this evening, is it 5 or 5:30? 5:30. We're going to do what God wants from you. You remember what John F. Kennedy said in his inaugural address? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Okay, so it's a little bit related to that. Yeah, what does God want from you? And that's a very important question. Okay, so divine standards versus human subjectivity. Let's start with this. We've been having a little bit of discussion previously in the campus center. There's no reason why we can't hear. As long as you just shout out your questions, comments, don't be bashful. Just shout so everybody can hear. It's okay. And how do you feel about God's law? Do you feel, when you hear that word law, particularly God's law, see? You can't escape God's law because God's law is everywhere, right? If you want to escape U.S. law, you go to Mexico. Or Canada if you don't want to get drafted. Remember that? That kind of dates me, I guess. Okay, you can go to another country, you can escape. You can't escape God's law. Okay, if you go to the moon, or you go to Venus, or Mars, or Jupiter, God's law is still there, right? Because he owns the universe. How do you feel about God's law? Does that intimidate you? Or it gives you courage, security? It's good to have a place where there's law. If there's chaos, it gets kind of out of hand, doesn't it? It's a little bit dangerous. Okay, the reaction of many to God's law is fear. Whoa, fear. Ooh. Is that how you feel about God's law? Looks like he's not going to hit the desk, he's going to hit you, right? Or throw the book at you. Okay. However, in the Bible, the word that's often translated law, which is Torah, is actually the word for teaching. It means teaching or instruction. In the book of Proverbs, it's the instruction which a mother gives to a child on her knee. Okay? So it's loving instruction. Why do you want to give a child instruction? You know, Johnny, don't run out on the road. Mary, don't put your hand on the hot stove. Stay close to me. Hold my hand when we walk through the supermarket. See? Instruction, you know, just simple stuff. And then there can be other instruction beyond that. We heard it in the children's story, right? How to share. I remember our little girl was about, she was 3 years old, and we got her a puppy for her 3rd birthday. His name was Coyote. And Coyote was quite a character, really lively. And one day, Sarah came to my wife and she said, "Coyote won't share." She thought Coyote should share. Okay, and Coyote didn't know that. So this is instruction. Torah is teaching or instruction. It actually comes from a root in Hebrew, yara, which means to shoot. So it's to send out, to distribute, or broadcast, in this case, knowledge or wisdom. The whole Bible, there are 3 sections to the Hebrew Bible: Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, then the Nevi'im, which is the former and latter prophets, some of the books we consider historical books, plus the books that we consider the prophets. And then there's the writings, which are the Psalms, the Proverbs, Song of Solomon, and those kind of things, including the book of Daniel, because that's a wisdom book in the Hebrew Bible. Okay? But I had a teacher, as I mentioned this week, his name is Isaac Kikawada, a Japanese scholar, and he pointed out that all 3 sections of the Hebrew Bible are really all Torah, Torah, Torah. Okay? And so God's teaching is what it's all about. It's all about God's character and ways. Otherwise, we wouldn't know, would we? You know, there was a Russian cosmonaut, the very first one. In fact, does anyone remember his name? The first person in space. Yuri Gagarin. He was in space before any American was. Yuri Gagarin. He was a cosmonaut. And he got up into space. He was a communist, so he was an atheist. And he looked out of his capsule window and he said, "I don't see God. There is no God." See? Well, what does Job say? It says, "Can you by searching find out God?" He's beyond the reach of empirical science. You can't just see God like that. I'm reminded of what happened in a communist country. It was told to me by one of my fellow professors who used to live in that country, grew up under communism. And there was a little boy named Peter who went to a school, and Peter believed in God. And the teacher didn't. The teacher was atheist and made fun of Peter and said, "Peter, you believe in God?" "Yes." "Have you seen God?" "Yes." "Ha! There is no God." And another little kid said, "Oh, well, but Peter can't see the teacher's brain either." Okay, so you can't see God like that, but the Bible reveals about God. God's character is unselfish love. We talked about that this past week, and that is what is revealed through the stories, the Psalms, Proverbs, prophecy. Everything is trying to get across the message that God really cares about you. He loves you. And love, as we pointed out, includes justice and mercy. The whole Bible is teaching about love. Leviticus 19, verse 18 says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul." Rabbi Hillel, who lived he was a little bit older than Jesus, and he basically summarized that the whole Bible is about love. Jesus said in Matthew 22, 37 to 40, he says that on these 2, and he quoted these 2 verses, hang all the Torah and the prophets. In other words, the whole revealed will of God up to that point, because the New Testament had not been written yet. See? So the whole Bible is teaching about love. Jesus was summarizing what we call the Old Testament at that point. Personal knowledge of God comes from all kinds of biblical teaching. God's people are accountable for all of this teaching. What we learn, principles from the book of Proverbs, from Song of Solomon. Very important principles in the book of Song of Solomon, see, about love. And we understand about God's love for us, but also pure, unselfish, passionate, married love. We learn from the Psalms about how to talk to God, how to have a catharsis when you're really upset. How do you talk to him? Read Psalm 109. You'll be blown away. Psalm 109, if you're really upset. Forgive not the sin of his mother. It gets really serious. And then you have other parts of the Bible in all different ways are teaching us about God, and we can give our thoughts to him and be safe. Prescriptive law. We're going to talk a little bit now about law. That's one kind of teaching, one way that we learn about God. And it's a way that is rather misunderstood, because people confuse law with legalism. Is law legalistic? No, it's people that are legalistic, right? When they use the law for a purpose for which it's not intended, such as to gain salvation. If you've already blown it, if you've already sinned, as the Bible says, then how are you going to, by more law keeping, get out of that? If you're on death row, how do you get out of there by doing community service? Huh? Okay? It's not going to work. It's really good. Keeping the law is great. Keeps you out of all kind of trouble. We're going to talk about that. But it can't fix the problem if you've already broken the law. Right? Okay. So law is limited in some ways, but it's very helpful. It's misunderstood because people use it not only to try to gain salvation when they've already blown it, but also to manipulate other people. And that happens in the area of religion a lot. People are trying to get others to live according to their standard, their personal standard, and they want to be sort of an elite and above people, have them listen to them and control them. So they'll come up with additional things that are not in God's law, and they'll try to impose it on other people. And there is no religious group on earth that is immune from that. And I'm talking, including this one right here. Okay? So we have to be really careful about that, not to use law as something to hit people over the head, to make them conform to us, to gain control over them. That's not the purpose of God's law. Okay. Law is emulating God's loving or holy character. Leviticus 11:44 to 45, and other passages. These passages say, "You shall be holy as I, the Lord your God, am holy." And how do we do that? Leviticus 19 verse 2 says that, but then in verse 18, it says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." So how do we be holy as God is holy? He shares his holy character with us by giving us the ability to love other people. Does that make sense? In other words, God's holiness includes his power, his glory, his being able to create the world. We can't do any of that stuff. But the part of his holiness that he shares with us, holiness really is his God-likeness. I mean, it's just the sum of his attributes, of his powers. But the part that he shares with us is he says, you have love, have a holy character, and these are the ways to do it, and he lays them out in Leviticus 19, including at the heart of the chapter, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. God's love is the guide to living. Psalm 143, verse 8, let me hear your steadfast love in the morning, for in you I put my trust. Teach me the way I should go, for to you I lift up my soul. Now, why does he say in the morning? Why do you think the morning is important here? Why is it important to hear of God's steadfast love in the morning? Because that's at the beginning of the day. You might meet someone during the day. And if you're not living in harmony with God's love and thinking about his love and emulating that and realizing that you gain love from him, from learning about his character, you may meet somebody. You may roll over and meet your spouse. Okay? You may even look in the mirror and meet yourself. That's pretty scary. For me, it's very funny. Okay, but this is, if we begin every day this way, by contemplating God's love and where it comes from. He's the only source of love in the universe. And if we gain that from him, it's going to change our day. Because, we all meet people during the day. How many people, anyone here who never meets a soul during their day? You don't meet anyone? No. Okay. Nobody here is in solitary confinement, I take it. Okay. And it matters. The relationships matter, whatever they are. And it makes a difference in your life. Love is expressed through the three creation institutions. See, love is the overall principle, which applies to everyone in the universe, including angels, right? Other created beings talked about in the Bible. But on earth, there are some particular circumstances. We have marriage, which angels don't have, according to the Bible. We have Sabbath, which is specifically for planet Earth. And we have work here. Others have their kind of work, I'm sure. But marriage, Sabbath, and work. And if you take love and you shine it through the prism of these three great creation institutions right in the beginning, you get the Ten Commandments, the principles behind the Ten Commandments. We won't go into all the detail. But marriage, for example, obviously, thou shalt not commit adultery. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. See, that's in the Ten Commandments. Sabbath, you shall not have other gods before me, right? The first 4 commandments are all related to that Sabbath command, which is all about, pledging allegiance to God as the Creator, as our Lord. And then work, you shall not covet, you shall not steal, right? Marriage, by the way, generates life and through parents. Honor your parents. New life come through that union. You shall not kill. See how that works? So love is the basic, and then these great creation things, God just made it that way. And then the 10 Commandments are great examples of how love works out within the context of planet Earth. Okay? It's really very simple and very logical. Why is love so important? We're about to have Valentine's Day, right? Today's the, 9th? February. Few days this week. Valentine's Day. Wow. Yeah. People love Valentine's Day. You know, I've even seen in the news that in Saudi Arabia, Saudi women love Valentine's Day. And they are not allowed to celebrate it, but they do anyway, secretly. You know, they get flowers or cards or hearts or whatever. It just appeals to their imagination. They love Valentine's Day. Well, and we do too. My wife and I are going to celebrate it. But why is love so important? Because it makes us feel good, and it's warm and it's fuzzy. And love is also very tough. And love is very important, and it's basic. Love, because real unselfish love is the only basis on which intelligent beings with free choice can live in harmony and not destroy each other. Love is as essential to the long-term survival of the human race as food and water are to our short-term survival. Ultimately, we cannot live without love. Does that make sense? Yeah, so you can eat vegan, you can run marathons, you can get lots of sleep, you can be really well, you can do all these wonderful things, and someone shoots you in the head because they hate your guts. You're just as dead could be. Just as if you smoked and drank yourself to death. See? Or died from an overdose. So love is a major problem. And ultimately, lack of love will cause the extinction of the human race. You know what, the way Albert Einstein, he talked about World War IV. You know how he said World War IV is going to be fought? With sticks and stones. Because World War III is going to destroy human civilization. See? Well, hopefully not, but hopefully things will be taken care of. But the fact is that we need love. Now, what is law? God's law is based on love, but what is law in general? It's the order of justice and right to which people should conform and which judicial authority should enforce. So it's an order. This is an abstract principle. Orderliness. The ancient Egyptians had this concept. They called it ma'at. Right, truthfulness, whatever. And in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, there is a picture. You can see it. Just Google Egyptian Book of the Dead. You can see pictures of a person being judged in the end by ma'at, represented by a feather on a scale, and the person's heart is on the other scale, and the heart is being weighed against that principle of rightness. Okay. Now, rules play some role in this order, but the order goes beyond that. Principles and values belonging to the community's collective conscience, but explicit rules, laws, are only the tip of the iceberg of law, Dale Patrick Old Testament law. So in other words, you can take all of the laws, you can put them all together, and their sum total doesn't equal what law is all about, because it's about an overall principle. For example, if you're down at a body of water and somebody's drowning, what should you do? Well, the law isn't going to tell you. You have to save the person. But a basic principle of human respect and desire to help human life is going to tell you, you really need to help that person if you can. See? So that's just an example. Authority behind biblical law. The source and authority is the God of Israel. The law is conveyed through Moses and other prophets. They're a medium, but he is the originator of the law and the author. This is an ethical and moral standard that he gets across, which is really reflecting the character of the one who gives the law. In other words, he's not a hypocrite. He is love, and so he teaches us what love is. Why do we need to have that teaching? Because we have departed so far from it. Now, let me give you an example. Years ago, I was going through line in a supermarket, and I was kind of bored because the line was kind of long, and so I made the mistake of picking up a People magazine. Okay? I was just curious what those folks were doing over there in Hollywood. And here's a picture of this young guy, really good-looking young actor. He has his arms around this gorgeous girl, and it's his new girlfriend. And the caption under says that what he said was, he's quote this guy, she's got the most beautiful body I've ever seen. We're very much in love. How long do you think that relationship is going to last? You know, I mean, that's part of it. You know, that's really good. You know, for romance, it's wonderful. If he thinks she's gorgeous, it's wonderful. I think that about my wife, right? But if that's all there is to it, it's not going to. And you know what Hollywood is all about? It's kind of like a revolving door. These marriages, if they last beyond a few weeks, whoo, that's great. This is going to go at least 3 months. I'm exaggerating a little, maybe. But you see, love. For human beings, this English word love has become corrupted, hasn't it, by the media? We think of self-gratification and lust and all these things. That's not what God's love is all about. It's unselfish love, being willing to die for another person if necessary. Right? That's a different kind of love. Love includes justice and mercy. And this past week, I mentioned the analogy of Rosa Parks, who didn't want mercy, she wanted justice when she was taken before the judge in Montgomery, Alabama. Right? She wanted justice. She wanted those unjust laws to be removed from the book. She didn't want mercy. You need not only mercy, you need justice. And you need not only justice, you need mercy. Both of them together include love. And the trick is how to get it together. Human beings have a lot of trouble doing that. King David had that trouble. He gave mercy to Absalom, but where was the justice? And Absalom rebelled against him, and so on. God is, through a very painful, difficult, long process, trying to demonstrate his absolute mercy and absolute justice so that everyone will choose to love him with full free choice. Choose to love him for all eternity. When you think about the challenge that poses, that's pretty amazing. Right? For us to choose anything for eternity, or even for a few weeks, that's kind of rough. But to choose to love God for all eternity so that sin will not arise a second time, that's incredible, and that's what he's trying to accomplish. The purpose of God's law, it benefits people. Deuteronomy 10, verse 13, the law is for your good, by guiding them to live in harmony with principles of cause and effect that God has created. Now, people don't really think about this. Folks wouldn't think of dumping, say, root beer in the gas tank of their car. Right? It's got sugar in it. It's going to destroy the engine. But yet, what do we dump in our bodies? Which is a much more important machine. I mean, what do? Do you total it? Take it to the scrap heap? Recycle it? No, you're kind of stuck with this body. And yet we put all kinds of garbage in. Principles of cause and effect of relationships. See? Relationships matter. And if you do something to somebody, then why be surprised if they react a certain way, right? So God teaches us, gives us wisdom about that, and this protects us from harm. Now, I'm thinking of a situation where my wife and I were backpacking around Israel years ago. We were poor students at the Hebrew University, studied there for 2 years, and we put on backpacks. We took the bus system all over the country to have a look around on very little money. One place we went to, we were trying to get to the bus stop or get somewhere, and there was a bit of a gap. And so we thought of taking a shortcut across this field. We had our backpacks on. It was kind of hot. We thought, if we can lessen the distance, that's great. So let's just cut across the field. But as we're about to start across the field, we noticed a sign. And the sign said on it, in Hebrew, Mokashim. Does anyone know what Mokashim are? Well, neither did I. So I took out my little Hebrew English dictionary that I never left home without, and I took it out and I looked up what's Mokashim. Landmines. Okay, I think we won't do that. Now look, that sign was like a law. It's a warning. Warnings can be good, can't they? It restricts my freedom. Come on, I want to. Oh yeah, go on and have a blast. Yeah, when we cross those boundaries and get hurt, sometimes it can cost an arm and a leg too. Yeah, it can be very dangerous. So the law is to protect us from harm. Why do people blame, oh, it's legalistic, it's too hard, when he's just trying to protect us? Don't go over that cliff. Don't jump over. Don't self-destruct. The Bible is the owner's manual by the manufacturer. Come on now. If God is really the creator, as the Bible claims that he is, then the Bible is, if God is the creator, then the Bible, which is his revelation of wisdom, is the manufacturer's handbook. I've got a Toyota Corolla, and I'm going to follow those instructions in the manual because those are the folks that made the vehicle. They know it best. God made me. He knows me best. I think you get the point. The Bible takes away uncertainty regarding God's will. We're going to talk about that a little bit this afternoon, but uncertainty was a terrible thing for ancient Near Eastern people. And it is for a lot of people today too. What does God expect of me? How do I know how to please God? You know, Martin Luther struggled with that. Mesopotamians in the ancient world, Egyptians, struggle with that. And I'll have some quotations for you later. But how do we deal with that? What if things are going badly? How do I know what I did wrong? How do I know how to live in a way that the deity will be happy with me? And God's law takes away uncertainty. It's a wonderful thing. It's gospel. It's good news. You see, if you've done something where you think maybe some God is angry with you, but you don't know if it's Adad or Shamash or Baal or, Enlil, Enki, Anu, you don't know which God it is, and they go on and on and on. And the ancient people had temples, expensive temples to all these different gods. There were like dozens of temples in the city of Babylon in the ancient world. All this expense and trouble. And you see it elsewhere in the world today when you travel. You see this kind of thing in some places where they worship a lot of different gods. And this great uncertainty. Which one have I offended? How do I find out? Well, got to go along to the temple to talk to the experts. Pay some money, of course. Do a sacrifice. The Mesopotamians would cut open a sheep that they sacrifice. They'll look in the liver, compare it with liver models, and with what situation happened when there was such and such a situation of that liver, or they would watch smoke or flight of birds or things like that to try to find out what's going on. Oh, that's cool. Now they think that it's Ishtar I've offended. Pretty scary to offend Ishtar, but she was a pretty heavy duty lady, and goddess of sex and violence and stuff like that. And she could do you in real quick. But if you know it's Ishtar, oh, that's cool. Oh, but how did I offend Ishtar? Well, pay some more money, more of these rituals, to divine. And then when you find that out, well, how do I put it right? Well, more money, more ritual. You see how this goes? The priest got real rich as a result. And when it's all done, you don't have really more assurance than you did when you started. With the God of Israel, whoa, it's really simple. Only one God to relate to. Doesn't that simplify things already? He tells you what makes him happy and what makes him unhappy. And not only that, he tells you in advance how to remedy it when you blow it. Talk about good news. God's law was wonderful. And this is all in the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Okay, purpose of God's law, a divine God, excellence of a model community to bring others to God. Deuteronomy 4 says that other nations would look at Israel and they'd say, this is a wise and understanding people. There's a principle, I just thought of formulating it like this last week or so, and that is corporate intelligence. Corporate intelligence. You may have heard of social intelligence. Individuals have various kinds of intelligence, right? There's intellectual and social and so on. But what about corporate? What about a group? Can a group manifest corporate intelligence? And that's what God is saying. Yes, that's what this is. Here's a group of people, wise and understanding people. Why? Because God is teaching them how to live in harmony with each other in a productive way so that they are blessed and flourishing. And, whoa, other people say, hey, what's going on here? These people are really doing well. What's up with you? How can we do that too? And that draws other people to God. What a wonderful thing that is. So God wants to lavish blessings on his people to attract others to him. Why do we want to live a good lifestyle so that we're healthy? Why do we want to manage our money well so that we're not bankrupt with MasterCard and Visa debt and all that stuff? Why do we want to have good relationships, get along well, and have a good community and live together? Why? Is it just for ourselves, feeding ourselves? No, the purpose is ultimately an outward one, so that other people will notice and they'll say, hey, what is this? Can I have this too? And then rather than doing like King Hezekiah did, when the Babylonian envoys came, he took them and showed them all of his wealth and splendor and showed off. What he should have done is to say, hey, you won't believe how great my God is. See? And that's the greatest thing that we can say to other people. We can brag about God. We brag about our football team. How many Ravens fans here? Oh, not very many. How many Gators fans? Oh, that's better. Okay. All right. So we brag about the Gators. We can brag about our computer. You know, I got a Mac. It's right down there, a Mac, one of these new ones with a Retina display. I really like it. Brag about my car. You know, I have a Toyota. I like it. I like Toyotas and so on. But what about brag about the most braggable thing that we can brag about? That's God. He's given us everything. Why don't we talk more about that? Just an idea. Not just an idea. It's a really important idea. Don't you forget it, okay? Law reveals sin, departure from love, to show the need for mercy and restoration. See, it's a feedback mechanism. Pain can be a good thing, a very good thing. When you experience pain, it tells you there's a problem. A lot of times people realize for the first time that they're really sick when there's discomfort. I was just noticing at the airport the other day, there was symptoms of what women feel when they get heart attacks, which are a bit different than men. You know, pressure, feeling in the chest, stabbing feeling in the back, various kinds of symptoms. Those kind of symptoms tell you, call 911, okay? And so when we have a problem, God's law, by comparing our lives, and that's why we meditate on the law, as the psalmist did, to see how does my life compare with what God has there, which is good for me, because if not, I'm going to get hurt, and I'm going to hurt others. And so the law reveals problems, and that's good. It's a diagnostic tool. We have diagnostic tools on our cars, right? That tell you when your engine is overheating or when you're low on oil, right? When you're low on gas. Those are all diagnostic. Those are good. Now, you could get down the bottom of the gas tank and say, I don't like the news I'm getting from that, so I'm going to ignore it. Oh, you'll be doing some walking or hitchhiking, okay? Benefits of biblical law. Biblical law teaches us about the character of God and theodicy. Theodicy is about the justification of the character of God. We learn a lot from that. Last night we talked about Yom Kippur and the character of God, the Day of Atonement, and how what he does is he saves people in a way. He forgives them in a way that clears all the questions. And he takes care of the judicial responsibility when he forgives truly guilty people, like me, and maybe you. And when he forgives truly guilty people, how can he be just as a judge? We learn about that. We can learn about deliverance and social justice. You know, this is something that I think we need to remember. I know that I know at Andrews this week, I think they're celebrating Martin Luther King. It's the Black History Week, see? And there are other social justice issues. There are a lot of social justice issues. And we need to remember those things and not forget. They are part of Torah. They're part of God's will to be just. I'm going to show you some more evidence this afternoon. Social justice is permeating Torah, and it's very important in the prophets because the people lost it, and the prophets hammer that. You are oppressing people, you're treating them badly, and so on. And that's one of the reasons why they went into captivity. Communal ethics. How do we get along as a group? That's challenging. See? You get a whole group of people with different personalities. You got sanguines and phlegmatics. You've heard all that stuff, right? Cholerics and what's the other one? Melancholy? Yeah, right. And melancholies are those for whom life is fraught with happiness. Anyway, you get these different personality types all mixed together, and they see the world differently because of the way that they're hardwired. And if you're married, you know, you have these kind of things too. My wife and I discovered that there's one area in which we were pressing the wrong buttons, but once we understood each other, then we knew how to get along better. Communal ethics, God teaches you how to get along. Marriage and sexual morality. Now, this is a real hot issue these days. In fact, I edited with two of my colleagues at Andrews University a book called Homosexuality, Marriage, and the Church. Okay, talk about a hot topic. And it's just come out recently from Andrews University Press. Homosexuality, Marriage, and the Church. And if you want, I'm leaving the discussion this afternoon because it's going to extend from what we do here this morning. But I'm going to leave it open at the end for talking about whatever you want to talk about, and I have some additional presentation material I can show you. And that's one topic that we could get into if you wish. There are others as well. But sexual morality is huge. Now, just very, very briefly, why do you think, if you were Satan, why would you be hell-bent on destroying human sexuality? Destroy family? What was somebody said about Creator? Created us, man and woman, and he created us in his image. So sexuality is a key indicator of the image of God in human beings. See, God is the creator, and man and woman create new life. God designates to them that capability, right? So to increase the number. So that unity is really emulating the divine creator. And so if Satan can come along and destroy that unity, then he can destroy the image of God in human beings and remove them from God. Does that make sense? How that works? It's diabolical. That means devilish. It's terrible. And we see it in so many different ways. Okay, and we can talk about that this afternoon if you want to pursue that. Beneficial lifestyle. That's another benefit. In fact, God said, if you obey all my laws, then none of these diseases will be upon you. Holistic health. It's not a matter of if you obey this law, well, it's going to help your left bicep, and this law, it's going to help your lungs. No, keep all of them, because God understood you could be doing all the right things in some way, but you're doing one thing that's out of sync, and even your relationships can destroy your health, right? Bad mental hygiene can destroy your health. Worry, insomnia. You may be doing all the other things right. He says, keep all my laws, which will give you a clean, clear conscience. You'll sleep like a baby at night. And you do all of these other things, and so on, and then you'll be well off. Sabbath and sanctification. Exodus 31, verse 13 says that Sabbath is a sign that I, the Lord your God, sanctify you. And Sabbath is a wonderful blessing. Some people think of it as a legalistic thing to keep Sabbath, which I just somehow don't get. I'm kind of dense in that respect, because, see, I'm a kind of a driven guy. You've heard of a type A personality? I may be triple A, I don't know. I'm driven, see? And on Sabbath, I would feel very guilty not working, except that God thunders from Mount Sinai with lightning and a trumpet and everything. Roy Gane, thou shalt not work on my holy day. Whoa, that releases me. I don't feel guilty not working on Sabbath, and I get the rest that I need. Now, if that's legalism, folks, give me more of it. That's a wonderful thing. Okay, and Sabbath, you see, God says, is a sign of holiness. Why? Because it connects us with the Creator. And it's a day when everyone is equal. You see, the rich person, the successful person, is not doing anything different than the poor person who's not so successful. We're all doing the same thing. Nothing before God, right? It's egalitarian. And it's a day that we concentrate on God and His holiness as our holy Creator. And that brings us into harmony with Him. That's a wonderful thing. So, holiness, what is holiness? Well, it's the character of God. What is the character of God? Love. So if Sabbath is a celebration of holiness, it's really a celebration of love, isn't it? And that's what we experience when we come together in a group like this. People who love each other, we're from all different backgrounds, we have very different kind of weeks, right? We're doing very different things, but we come here, we have something in common, and we love each other, we care about each other, we're going to be a support system. When somebody's down or in trouble, we care. And that's great. Okay, discussion questions. Why do we need, absolute divine standards? Why do we need absolute divine standards? Well, why do we need absolute standards? How come we need, say, Greenwich Mean Time? Why does the orchestra need a tune to A is 440 vibrations per second is the pitch A? Isn't that the oboe that starts? The oboe starts. You're a saxophone player, Junie, right? You play the oboe. Okay, so you start the orchestra, you tune up, and you always have to start with A440. Okay? All right? What about the inch or the foot? Aren't these absolute standards? Are they kind of important? What would the orchestra sound like if one player says, oh, I really would rather have 500. Yeah, that's a bigger number. I'd rather have 666 or, whatever, some other 777. Woo, what's it going to sound like? Terrible cacophony. And what about, how would buildings get built if everyone has a different standard? We need those absolute standards, don't we? Now, I'm reminded of a story about a man who used to be responsible for blowing the noon whistle at a factory every day. Very important, because everybody in that whole town used to set their watches by that noon whistle. Okay? And so how did he get the time? This is before, atomic watches and all that stuff. This is an atomic watch. I use it to regulate my nuclear family. And so it's before that. He would walk every morning past the watchmaker's shop. And he figured the watchmaker's the expert. He has a clock there in the window. He would always set his watch to that clock, and then he would blow the noon whistle accordingly. One day he was chatting with the watchmaker, and it somehow came out in the conversation. How did the watchmaker figure out how to set his clock? By the noon whistle. So you see, it was circular. This is such an important concept. Circularity, see, that wasn't an absolute, was it? Absolute has to be grounded in some external reality, right? Unlike a woman who's traveling on a plane at night over the water before 9/11 when you could go talk to the captain. She went up to the captain and she said, how do you steer this plane at night? Captain says, see that green light on that wingtip? Yeah. See the red light on that wingtip? Yeah. I just steer the plane straight between them. Yeah. Okay. Why are human standards always subjective? Why are human standards always subjective? Not created by God? What is there about God's knowledge versus my knowledge that makes a difference? He knows everything. You see, you can only be objective, completely objective. As scholars, we have a number of students here at UF, right? How many students at UF? Very good. We're becoming scholars, aren't we? In various ways. Or we are scholars. Excuse me. And as such, as scholars, we are learning to not only about standards, but to objectively think about those things. And we're learning to try to be as objective as we can in our experiments, everything. We want to take out that human variable of just my opinion, right? To be objective. Can we be totally objective? Never, because we don't have infinite knowledge. We have degrees of subjectivity. We try to be as objective as we can. Only God is infinitely objective because only God has infinite perspective, right? That makes sense? Okay. Why isn't political correctness all we need? This is moral democracy. Why isn't political correctness all we need? We agree upon it. We vote upon everything else. Why shouldn't we vote on morality? And we all agree on it. Well, has political correctness largely replaced God's law in our culture? What is the ultimate result of that? Okay, here, what are the results? Look at this. Rabbi Stuart Fogel. That should be a T on the end of that name. I'll have to fix that. That's a T. Rabbi Stuart Fogel. If each of us creates his own meaning, we also create our own morality. I cannot believe this, for if so, what the Nazis did was not immoral because German society had accepted it. Likewise, the subjective morality of every majority culture throughout the world could validate their heinous behavior. Look, the Nazis were elected democratically. Did you know that? There was an election that elected them to power. And that was political correctness, what they were engaged in. And folks, that can happen to us. And other things can happen to us if we don't listen to absolute standards. Human morality is not enough, including political correctness. It comes down to a very simple matter. This is Rabbi Fogel. Without God, there is no objective meaning to life, nor is there an objective morality. I do not want to live in a world where right and wrong are subjective. That's pretty strong words. That's in his book with Laura. You've heard of Laura Schlesinger? Okay? And he wrote this book, The Ten Commandments. Now here's another writer, John Walton. One does not refrain from adultery merely because adultery disrupts society. Rather, adultery is prohibited because it goes against an absolute standard of morality by which Yahweh, that's the Lord, himself is characterized. See? That's the absolute. It's not, is it convenient? Is it? No. Not even if everybody agrees. Dennis Prager, a Jewish radio talk show host in Los Angeles, said he didn't trust anyone who didn't believe in God. Why not? Because only a sense of accountability to God is powerful enough to adequately restrain people from hurting each other. Whoa, again, pretty strong. God is fair and objective. And here it celebrates to the point that the trees are even celebrating here, that God is coming to rule the earth. He will rule the world justly, and its people in faithfulness. He will judge justly. See, judge the people with equity, and this is something to celebrate. God is fair. That's an incredible thing. God's fairness. God's omniscience is the reason he can be fair. In Psalm 139, where we had our scripture reading, "O Lord, you have examined me and know me. When I sit down or stand up, you know it. Discern my thoughts from afar. Examine me, O God, know my mind. Probe me, know my thoughts. See if I have vexatious ways or evil ways. Guide me in ways everlasting." God knows everything, and that's why we can feel secure with him. Has anyone heard of Lindy Chamberlain? Australian lady, pastor's wife. Actually, he was an Adventist pastor. And they were camping by Ayers Rock in the middle of Australia, and a dingo came into the tent and stole their baby girl and took off with the baby and ate the baby, killed the baby. And there was, but they didn't find the dingo. And there was a terrible situation where they were accused of murdering the baby. And the woman ended up with a newborn baby in a prison for a long time. She couldn't even nurse her baby. It was terribly painful for her. And she was there for a long time, accused in a capital case, the most celebrated case in Australian legal history. And it's still, whenever Lindy Chamberlain comes up, it's top news. I visited Australia, a decade later or so, and there she was on the news. So what's the problem? Those Northern Territory police didn't know everything. They were acting on their human judgment and wisdom. They didn't know everything. God does know everything, so we can trust that he's fair. Now, I told you that I was going to tell you what happened to me yesterday, didn't I? Okay. What happened was that, Roy Gaine's kind of a weird character. He's a professor. And so when I get up in the morning, I like to go outside for some fresh air before I eat. So I went outside. My wife called me. I had a cell phone. I walked around outside. I had my slacks on because it was a little bit cool. And I was talking with her. And then after we got done talking, I was going to go and have breakfast or do whatever. I think that was it. And so to get a little bit of extra oxygen in my lungs, I just burst into a sprint. And then I wanted to stretch out. And right underneath Joseph's apartment, there's another apartment, but there's a flight of steps that goes down, right? And so I always look for a place that I can hang and stretch out. So I went around a few feet away from that door down below, another apartment, and I went there and then I went up and I went into Joseph's apartment. Well, a little while later, I'm just mellow there in Joseph's place, and he's gone off to work doing his chemistry lab thing, and I got a knock on the door. 2 policemen. And one at the foot of the stairs. "Step outside, please." And then they say that a neighbor a ways away had noticed that a person that they hadn't seen in that neighborhood before, wearing slacks, was running, so it wasn't just jogging for exercise that they knew of. And the person went, and they tried one door, and then they went upstairs and tried another door. And it looked very suspicious. It all added up. And they suspected the worst, so they called the police. The police showed up. Tell me, hands out of your pockets? My instinct is to, pull my pockets out like I do with airport security to show I have nothing in them. But hands out of your pockets. And then they talked to me, and I described what happened. And it made sense to them. But they wanted to check it out for sure. And the policeman says, "Well, can I come in and make sure there's no dead body in there?" He was serious. Whoa. Glad there was nobody napping. And So he goes in and checks the place out, and there's no dead body, not even the smell of a dead body. And then he checks out the key. I said I had a key that was important, and he tried the key in the door. And then they wished me a good day, and they went their way. See? Well, I was impressed with the neighborhood. The neighbors are watching out for their neighbors. I was impressed with the police. They're doing their job. That's great. But you see, this was a situation in which human beings didn't have full knowledge. They were acting to the best of their knowledge, but God has full knowledge, so he's fair. Okay, that's the story, all right? I'm here, no handcuffs, and all is well. I'm getting close to the end, but I want to share with you this poem by Hannah Senes. Anyone heard of Hannah Senes? She was a Hungarian Jewish resistance fighter in World War II. She grew up in Hungary, in Budapest, I guess they call it, and she left the country. She was trained by the British. She was airlifted back into the country to do covert operations to try to release it from the Nazis. And she had gone to Israel for a while, learned Hebrew, and she wrote this poem in 1942. Now, very tragically, the operation was not successful. She was caught along with the others by the Nazis, and she was with terrible torture. There's a movie about her, by the way, interrogated with torture, and then just as the Russians were approaching, you could hear their artillery in 1945, they were coming to liberate the place, she was shot by a firing squad. So she died in her early 20s, later buried with full military honors in Israel. This is a poem she wrote in 1942 called Loneliness. Could I meet one who understood all, without word, without search, confession or lie, without asking why? I would spread before him like a white cloth, the heart and the soul, the filth and the gold. Perceptive, he would understand. And after I had plundered the heart, when all had been emptied and given away, I would feel neither anguish nor pain, but would know how rich I became. Isn't that awesome? That's an English translation in a book. Look, there's no human being that, for me, is like that. But God is like that. He knows everything. So I can totally trust him with everything I have. All my thoughts, everything I can express to him. He can handle it. He can deal with it. He's completely fair. And that's the wonderful thing about God's objectivity versus human subjectivity, that I really can't totally trust other human beings and society. Can't even trust myself. But I can trust him. So let's have a final song, and then we'll have a prayer, and then we'll eat some good food. All right, let's pray, shall we? Father in heaven, thank you that we can open ourselves to you, spread everything before you, the good and the bad, the happy and the sad, and that you will take what we have and you will lead us in your way. You have the big picture. We can trust you. We feel so insecure. Life could end at any moment for us here on earth. But that doesn't matter, because according to Job, he said, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that I will stand in the latter day upon the earth. So it doesn't matter if we live. What matters is if he lives, he can recreate us. Thank you for that assurance. Be with us now the rest of this beautiful day in Gainesville, and as we enjoy the meal and talking to each other and getting acquainted, and then coming back together again for more Bible study, please be with us. We thank you in your name. Amen. I understand that everybody's welcome to the potluck. Is that correct? Okay, so don't go away. There's going to be good food.